Judge discharges jury in Donald Tsang bribery trial. Local workers can expect a more than 3% pay rise next year. And last remaining ISIS stronghold falls in Syria. Hello, good evening. The judge presiding over the bribery trial of Donald Tsang has discharged the jury. It happened after the 8 jurors failed to reach a majority verdict following 2 days of deliberation. Donald Tsang's stay at the High Court may have ended, but he said the trial is not over.
經過差唔多5年多嘅磨折，即係心力交瘁。
My family is exhausted after almost 5 years of torture. He made those remarks after a long wait to learn if he is guilty of chief executive accepting an advantage, which carries a maximum prison term of 7 years. The former chief executive allegedly, without lawful authority or reasonable excuse, accepted the refurbishment and redecoration of a Shenzhen flat, which exceeded $3 million. Prosecutors argued that Donald Tsang then became favourably disposed to broadcaster Wave Media Limited. The jury's verdict never arrived. 8 jurors said all parties stood firm and couldn't reach an at least 6-2 majority verdict. That's despite repeatedly seeking clarification and the judge's instructions over the past 2 days. Justice Andrew Chan thanked them for their tough duty before discharging them. This retrial came about after the previous jury was discharged in February. The previous 9-member panel failed to reach a majority verdict on this same bribery charge. With another discharged jury, could this mean another retrial?
Although the judge has got no discretion in ordering a retrial, the prosecution has a duty to reconsider whether it is in the public interest to continue the prosecution.
In the words of prosecutor Eric Kwok, all will be revealed on Monday. That's when lawyers return to the High Court for further discussions. The chief executive today softened her stance on co-location plans for the high-speed rail to the mainland. Carrie Lam says she'll now wait for lawmakers to vote on the government's motion when they debate it again in a fortnight. Anne-Marie Sim reports.
I feel very sad, very disappointed and very frustrated.
And that was the CE's reaction to the opposition camp's efforts to delay a vote in LegCo on the government's co-location plans for the high-speed rail to Guangzhou. The plan would give mainland authorities immigration and customs jurisdiction at parts of the rail link's West Kowloon terminus. Yesterday, through a cunning filibustering tactic, they forced adjournment of the debate and made sure Lam's administration won't get its motion passed swiftly. LegCo can't put the motion to a vote again for at least another 2 weeks, as the House has to deal with other issues on the agenda.
At the moment, we are very confident and very hopeful that when Legislative Council meets on the 15th of November to continue their discussion on the government motion on the co-location arrangement, that it will be put to vote and hopefully passed. I do feel that we could wait for the motion to be passed on the 15th of November.
That's a somewhat softened stance compared to last week, when she warned that the government would push ahead with the process of implementing the arrangement anyway, vote or not. Today, the CE noted that some members of the community had told her of their high hopes for this term of government and of how they wanted it to do a lot of things for the people of Hong Kong.
In my maiden policy address, I have outlined no less than 200 initiatives that we want to pursue. Many of these initiatives will require funding approval by the Legislative Council or amendments to legislation to be approved by the Legislative Council. But if the Legislative Council is not possible to conduct its normal business, then the chances of our taking forward these efforts will be significantly compromised.
Lam urged the Pan-Democrats to end their filibustering, as time was needed to finish local legislation on the co-location plan before June. The Guangzhou-Shenzhen-Hong Kong Express rail link is expected to enter service by the 3rd quarter of next year. Anne-Marie Sim, TVB News.
A new survey on wages shows that local workers can look forward to an average pay rise of 3.5% next year. Sharon Tan reports.
Some good news for local workers. A pay rise is just around the corner. The Hong Kong Institute of Human Resource Management surveyed 95 establishments from August to September. Almost half of them plan to raise salaries in the coming year by roughly 3.5% overall. That's slightly higher than the 3.3% rise this year. I believe the economic situation is rather positive. A lot of companies are practical when it comes to hiring people, says Alice Wong of the Institute of Resource Management. When it's not easy to find a suitable person, they won't minimize the pay increase all of a sudden, she added. The high salary increment this year went to the financial service sector with a 6.2% increase. Non-governmental organizations saw pay go up by 4%. Workers in utilities and construction have seen pay go up by 3%. Those working in telecoms and IT only saw growth of less than 1%. Research also found that smaller organizations tend to have greater inflation rates in terms of wages. For SMEs with under 500 employees, wages have gone up by nearly 4% this year. Whereas large companies consisting of 1,000 employees or above, workers have seen their pay rise by 3.2%. Meanwhile, another survey done by the Federation of Hong Kong and Kowloon Labour Unions found that workers want a 6% salary increase next year. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
Turning overseas now, the Syrian government claims the Islamic State group no longer has control over the city of Deir ez-Zor. State-run television announced the Syrian army had pushed out the remaining ISIS fighters and are now removing the booby traps and mines left behind. It's a victory in the military's fight to capture ISIS strongholds in the oil-rich province along Iraq's border. Russian-backed allied forces helped with the campaign that began in September. A Spanish judge has jailed 9 former members of Catalonia's separatist government in connection with last week's declaration of independence. He's also considering a possible international arrest warrant for the region's former leader. Alan Buckner reports.
Carles Puigdemont and his 13-member council were summoned to Spain's National Court yesterday to answer to possible charges of rebellion, sedition, and breach of trust. That's in connection with using public money for an October 1st referendum that the court ruled illegal, and the subsequent declaration of independence, which violates the Spanish Constitution. The central government then took the unprecedented step of triggering constitutional powers to take control of the semi-autonomous region. All 9 members who attended court were ordered jailed, 8 without bail, pending a comprehensive probe to determine if they should be formally charged, a process that could take months. They were taken from court in police vans and assigned to prisons in the Madrid area. The judge is also contemplating whether to issue international arrest warrants for Puigdemont and 4 cabinet ministers who went to Belgium. Puigdemont's lawyer in Madrid called the arrests groundless and disproportionate and said he would appeal. In a short address broadcast by Catalan regional television, Puigdemont called for the release of the legitimate government of Catalonia. He said the judge's decision is a serious attack on democracy. Thousands of protesters took to the streets of Catalan towns condemning the pre-charge detentions. Separatist politicians and elected officials called the detentions an attack on ideas. Alan Buckner, TVB News.
China and Vietnam have reached an agreement to manage their dispute in the South China Sea. Details of the agreement aren't out yet, but China's foreign minister said they've ironed out their differences via friendly talks. This after Wang Yi met with Vietnam's Prime Minister and Communist Party head. Both countries have been at loggerheads over the strategic waterway through which trillions of US dollars in cargo passes each year. US Republicans unfurled a broad tax overhaul package that features sharply lower rates for corporations and individuals. But there are fewer deductions for homebuyers, those with student loans and families with steep medical bills.
Our corporate tax rate is 60% higher than our average competition. We'll slash the corporate rate from 35% to no more than 20%. That's truly one of the big things in the bill. What that's going to do is create tremendous success for companies and jobs. It's about jobs.
One thing is crystal clear. This plan is a tax burden that ought to be on the backs of the wealthy and the biggest corporations, but instead it drops it squarely on the backs of the middle class. You're a big corporation, you're a wealthy individual, you do great. You're a middle-class person, you suffer.
The plan would be the biggest rewrite of the American tax code in 3 decades, a move that would increase the national debt. But there is enough discontent among some Republicans and certain business groups to leave it unclear if the legislation can pass through Congress. Meanwhile, 2 U.S. supersonic bombers flew over the Korean peninsula in a show of force against North Korea. It comes ahead of U.S. President Donald Trump's 12-day trip to Asia, his first official visit to the region. South Korea said the B-1B bombers based in Guam were escorted by 2 South Korean fighter jets during the drills. The drills simulated attacks on land targets but did not involve live weapons. North Korea's state media denounced the exercise as a surprise nuclear strike drill. 100 years ago, Britain endorsed the establishment of a Jewish homeland in the Middle East. The Balfour Declaration triggered a process that would culminate in the creation of Israel and a still unsettled conflict. James Aiken reports.
On streets across the West Bank and beyond, thousands of Palestinians marked a century since Britain promised the creation of a Jewish home in what is now Israel.
Balfour gave Palestine for the Zionists, and he neglected that there are a Palestinian population here in our land.
This is a message to the British government that what they did before 100 years will never pass, and we will never forget.
The 1917 declaration served as the basis for the British Mandate of Palestine, which was approved in 1920 by the League of Nations. Israel views the pledge as the first international recognition of the Jewish people's desire for a homeland, with Britain having played a supporting role. At the end of the mandate, Israel declared independence in 1948. With that came increased friction with the Arab population. In London, Israel's Prime Minister said it's time for Palestinians to embrace a declaration that remains at the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian territorial conflict.
And if they do, they will find in Israel and in me an enthusiastic partner for building a peaceful and prosperous future for both our peoples. It's within our reach. I think it's getting closer.
Earlier this week, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas reiterated calls for the British government to acknowledge the declaration was a mistake.
When some people suggest we should apologize for this letter, I say absolutely not. We are proud of our pioneering role in the creation of the State of Israel.
May said she recognized the sensitivities surrounding the declaration's anniversary. She said she and Netanyahu would discuss barriers to the peace process, such as Israel's Jewish West Bank settlements. James Aiken, TVB News.